Hello. You'll be familiar, I presume, with the expression the Grand Tour. Loosely, it was a kind of cultural tour generally taken by young upper class men in the 18th and early 19th centuries. And again, loosely speaking, these were tours of Europe. But as with the ancient Romans, all roads led to Rome. To go on a grand tour and not visit Italy and not visit Rome even would have been unthinkable. So this programme is about music and the Grand Tour, and more specifically, it's about music and the Grand Tour in Italy. So let's start with some music. Listen to this, if you will. That was the Avinson Ensemble, that's my surname, Davison without the D, playing the final movement of the Violin Sonata in A major, Opus 5 by Arcangelo Corelli, I beg your pardon. And I played that piece of music for a specific reason. In the 1750s, a very rich young man called Lord Monthermer, John Lord Monthermer, the eldest son of the Master of the Ordnance, John II, Duke of Montagu, went on a grand tour, and he had the leading portraitist in Rome at the time, somebody called Pompeo Batoni, paint a picture of him holding an elaborately decorated mandolin and a score of the music you just heard. Like a great many grand tourists, he went to the opera in Florence and Rome and Naples, and as souvenirs he brought back a collection of musical scores. The family of the Dukes of Buccleuch has a very large collection of these and other scores, many of which were acquired by grand tourists such as John Montagu. The Grand Tour began about 1660, but it didn't really become truly fashionable until the century that followed, and it remained so until round about the advent of large-scale rail transport in the 1840s. It was seen as something of a rite of passage for young nobility and the well-to-do, and it was also seen as an important feature of aristocratic education. It exposed young men, and towards the end of the heyday of the Grand Tour, women too, to the arts and culture of classical and Renaissance Europe, and particularly Italy. And it gave these wealthy individuals the opportunity to acquire things that were otherwise unavailable to them, and they would often return to Britain. Most but by no means all grand tourists were from Britain, by the way, with books and works of art and scientific instruments and statues and snuff boxes and goodness knows what else. That what else also included music, musical instruments, scores, and musical tastes. And that's what brings me to my next piece of music. In 1710, someone called Thomas Rosengrave, who was an English-born Irish composer and organist, was sent to Italy with the financial assistance of St Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin to, quotes, improve himself in the art of music. So he became an early grand tourist, and his story really does sum up what this programme is all about. When he was in Italy, he went to Venice, and there he visited Domenico Scarlatti, and he was hugely impressed. And when he came home, he published an edition of Scarlatti's sonatas for harpsichord, and this led to something of a Scarlatti cult in England. Rosengrave also produced a Scarlatti opera, which was commonly known as Narcissus in the Haymarket Theatre in London's West End. Anyway, this is Ralph Kirkpatrick playing part of Scarlatti's Sonata for G for harpsichord, as soon as I can find it. I said a couple of minutes ago that grand tourists often brought objet d'art or in some form music home with them after their adventures in Italy. Well, how about bringing a musician home with them? Sir Peter Beckford was a very wealthy man. He was the father of a novelist and nephew of someone who was twice Mayor of London. He was a grand tourist twice over. In 1765, after he inherited his father's Dorset estate, he made his way to Italy, stopping off in Geneva on the way to have a chat with Voltaire and Rousseau, and then making his way to Rome. And there he bought some antiques, and like John Montague, who I mentioned earlier, he commissioned a portrait by Pompeo Battoni. He also heard a 14-year-old prodigy play, Muzio Clementi, and he was so impressed that he arranged with the boy's father to take him home with him. Beckford agreed to sponsor Clementi's musical education until he was 21, and in return the boy was expected to provide musical entertainment. And so for 7 years Clementi lived, performed and studied at Beckford's Dorset estate. He would spend 8 hours a day at the harpsichord, and thus began one of the most successful concert pianist careers of the period. In fact, he became known as the father of the piano, and he even produced and sold his own brand of the instrument. Later in life, Clementi took part in a piano playing competition with Mozart, and there are differing accounts of the relationship between the two men. Anyway, a few years after his contract with Beckford expired, Clementi returned to Italy for his own kind of grand tour of sorts. And in 1783 he returned to England, where he spent 20 years playing, conducting and teaching. As a composer, Clementi is best known for his piano music, and here's an example. This is Piotr Kapinski skipping his way through the second movement of Clementi's keyboard sonata in A major, opus 10. I think that's one of these early classical pieces that actually sounds quite modern here and there. Clementi's symphonies aren't as well known as his piano music. He wrote quite a few of them, but only 6 largely completed symphonies can be heard today. And I want to play the finale of the 3rd symphony for reasons which, well, I think you'll appreciate when you hear it. Let's hear it now. Well, clearly you heard snippets of what at the time I suppose would have been God Save the King in that movement. The national anthem also appears elusively in a kind of fragmented fashion in the second movement of that symphony. Obviously, it was Clementi's tribute to his adopted country. It sounds a bit heavy-handed to me, actually, but anyway. It's been said it's a pity that Clementi hadn't been borrowed by a grand tourist from Paris, because who knows, he might have written a symphony that incorporated the French national anthem, and that might have been a bit better. But anyway, one of Muzio Clementi's pupils when he was a teacher was somebody called Ludwig Berger, who himself became a piano teacher and who went on to teach Felix Mendelssohn. And it's to Mendelssohn that I'm going to turn next, not least because I didn't want this programme to feature solely Baroque or early classical music. Mendelssohn enjoyed a grand tour to Italy in 1830 when he was 21. So this is towards the end of the heyday of grand touring. He absolutely loved the place, and he wrote exuberant letters to his folks back home, extolling the virtues of the ruined glory of the Forum and the Colosseum in Rome, and the beauty of the countryside and the palazzi and the canals of Venice, and so on. In 1831 he began work on his fourth symphony, which became known as the Italian. However, how much of it is Italian is open to conjecture. Musicologists have come up with a range of interpretations of this very popular symphony. Some say the lively opening movement recalls a busy street scene, perhaps in Venice. Others say it's a musical rendition of the clear blue Italian sky that Mendelssohn, who was born in the somewhat grey and drab city of Hamburg, loved so much. As for the second movement, well, it's been said to be some sort of musical tribute to the splendour of ancient Rome. When he was on his grand tour, Mendelssohn spent Holy Week in Rome, and he was impressed by a religious procession he saw when he was there. Mendelssohn asked that the second movement be played andante con moto, that's to say, at walking pace but with momentum, which I suppose what you might expect of a religious procession. So I thought we could conclude this video with the opening two movements of Mendelssohn's Symphony No. 4, the Italian. This is a 1961 recording in which Otto Klemperer takes the Philharmonia Orchestra along at a somewhat stately pace, particularly in the opening movement. So, two movements of the Italian Symphony. we'll continue with the last two movements of the Italian Symphony in video number 2. Thank you.